welcome. Jamie, please. Okay, while we are preparing, okay, it's a live forum. Welcome, please. So let me welcome you, all of you on stage, and introduce you. Jamie Wiseman, excuse me. I'm shocked because I've learned the news right now about the task force. That's why my mind is running. So Jamie Wiseman, IPI, International Press Institute, Advocacy Officer, welcome. Massimo Moratti, OBCT Transeuropa Senior Research Affiliate, welcome. Attila Monk, Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, Europe Representative, welcome. And Yasmine Dezeu, Free Press Unlimited, PFU Legal Advisor, welcome, Yasmine. Thanks for being here with us. I would ask if we, thank you, manage this voice because we don't have so much time, but you're bringing to us fresh news, and we're very curious on your findings, but also, to be honest, on the methodology you followed. And let's start actually, Jamie, with the reason why you're here, why all of you, and how all of you as a team are here. What exactly do you investigate, and why now?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. And yeah, great to be here. I think our trip to Greece in person has been a long time overdue. So we've wanted to come for a long time, and it's been great to be here for the last 3 days, and we're excited to share some of the findings with you. But basically, since I think around 2020, and since then for the last few years, all of our organizations kind of watched in quite astonishment as just one after the other kind of challenges and threats, attacks on journalists have happened in Greece. Starting during the pandemic with increasing attacks on the physical safety of journalists, manipulation of state advertising to media under the so-called PETSAS list, increasing lawsuits and strategic litigation against journalists. Of course, the hammer blow came in 2021 with the murder of Yorgos Karaivas. And then even after that, we saw spyware, wiretapping, and it's just across the board, and that's on top of systemic issues kind of underneath. So I think Greece maybe flew under the radar for quite a few years, but particularly Karaivas and his assassination really put the spotlight on Greece. So we did an online mission in 2021. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't come. So this is really a follow-up to that, to come here to meet with journalists, editors, unions, associations, the task force that was mentioned, and we'll discuss that in a bit, as well as kind of state representatives, with the idea of assessing, okay, let's look back in the last few years, assess all the changes, identify the biggest challenges, but then also make recommendations for what needs to change moving forward. So, yeah, as you said, we're a delegation of multiple organizations. It's coordinated by the Media Freedom Rapid Response, which is a consortium of ourselves, Article 19, Free Press Unlimited, the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom, the European Federation of Journalists, which was created a few years ago to strengthen European advocacy on media freedom issues and independent journalism. So we do a number of missions. We were in Poland a few weeks ago. We're going to Bosnia for a similar kind of mission to speak with state representatives and journalists. So we did our press conference yesterday. We published a press release, and yeah, we're having a report to follow up in the next few weeks and months, both in Greek and English as well.
To any meetings you had, did you meet other journalists who may already knew about this task force? Exactly because I felt very alone here on stage without having any idea about the task force.
So I think that's something that we raised with the task force itself, is it's how well known it is. A number of leading editors, those reporting on press freedom quite regularly, they also were unaware of the task force.
Okay.
But I think it's important to stress that it is doing good work, and as Yorgos said, it is bringing people together in a forum that did not happen before. We know that particularly a lot of the unions don't necessarily speak to one another here, so it is important. But I think its transparency and how good a job it does in communicating what its aims are, what its purposes are, and in particular to be honest, publishing some information would be a good place to start.
Yeah, actually. Let's start with your investigation and let's understand what were the key pillars, let's say, of whatever you did investigate.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you mentioned them already. This is kind of the four key themes that we wanted to identify during meetings with journalists and others, and that was based on our monitoring over many, many years. So, I mean, they're going to sound pretty obvious when I say them. Yeah, it's spyware. This is looking at predator and intellector, as well as wiretapping by legal means by the state. That was one. The second was safety of journalists, a major issue here, as all journalists would probably say, both online and physical attacks, looking at impunity as well. What's being done to bring justice for Karaivas and other murders in the past as well. And then legal threats. We've seen an increase in strategic lawsuits against public participation, or SLAPs, essentially litigation aimed at suppressing legitimate watchdog journalism with huge demands for compensation that's meant to kind of intimidate a media into silence. And then the kind of underlying issues around media pluralism, media independence and that kind of thing, and media ownership as well. So we kind of analyzed those four themes throughout different meetings with as broad a range of stakeholders as possible.
Okay, so let's get deeper and start with the key findings. Let's start with the key findings around journalist safety and impunity in Greece.
Yes, thanks. We investigated, and of course this is a topic we followed over the past years. We don't just collect data in these 3 days. Safety of journalists in Greece, the murder of Yorgos Karaivas is of course the most grave example, which has not only shocked media landscape in Greece, but all over Europe. Our first finding on safety, based on interviews with media, with government representatives, with quantitative data on attacks, is that his murder and the lack of convictions mark a pattern. Nearly all cases of attacks on journalists in Greece go unpunished. While we welcome the 2 arrests in his case, we see that the huge delays in trying to turn evidence into convictions are replicated in other attacks, both threats to journalists' lives, physical attacks, and digital attacks. And thereby we also notice in our meetings with government representatives that a sense of urgency is lacking. These cases are not, as they should, treated with special priority, because they not only have an impact on journalists, but also on the wider media, freedom, the sense of security for journalists, the extent to which they censor their own work out of fear for repercussions. So our second finding is that we are worried that there are no concrete measures, no action plan, either taken or planned to do something about this issue. There's a lack of data about the amount of attacks. There is no authority that has looked into the question, why are these cases never resulting in convictions? Which, in our experience, warrants a special answer compared to other criminal cases, as we see a pattern of the link between a journalist's work and the attacks they receive. And then lastly, one of the main findings in this regard is that there's no oversight authority that is not politically appointed who can gather information about what is going wrong in these investigations. This information lies with individual prosecutors, and there are no independent authorities gathering that information and analyzing it.
Thank you. Thank you, Yasmai. Let's see what's going on with spyware. Very famous here in Greece, unfortunately.
Yes.
Greek journalists, and the findings from this perspective, Massimo.
Yes, I mean, just to connect what Jasmine said, I mean, there is no database, no information on what is happening publicly, which is violence, which is happening in front of the eyes of everybody. So let's imagine how much information there is about spyware. Basically nothing. So we're chasing, as you said, they were chasing the predator, in our own internal discussions, because, I mean, this is something that it exploded in the press, in the private press, but surprisingly had not much resonance here in the public. A lot of the people talking were not aware of this. That probably a bigger echo outside Greece than in Greece itself. And so basically, one of the findings, I mean, is that, yeah, we have a number of journalists. We don't know how many. We're talking about a list of 80 persons together were subject to, traditional wiretapping, and some of them were also members of were also victims of the predator spyware. We don't know how many. We're really trying to chase the figures in this sense, and then it's good that there is some initiatives that are coming forward. I mean, what we could see, I mean, basically the government line has been a sort of like denial that this was happening. What we could see and witness was the impact that this had on the journalists. We spoke with a number of different, many journalists coming from different media, from the smallest media to the big sort of like media houses. And I mean, the impact is quite significantly different, because if you are a young journalist, you're trying to start your activity, and you know that you're being spied, I mean, this is really, destroys your potential to work. We know that many of them were trying to, chasing ghosts, because they're trying to start lawsuits, but they did not know against whom, against where to send them. Then eventually some people are trying to make it to the court in Strasbourg. So, and then, so this is one point of view, from the point of view of a legal defense, that there is no way of defending themselves. But then it's the impact of the work, as I said, which is, disproportionately higher on the young journalist, on the type of journalist and the type of media that is most needed in Greece at the moment, because we need also the ones that are coming sort of like spontaneous. And many of them were affected by this in such a way that they could not really work anymore. Some of them failed to come to our meetings, because they know that, I mean, not only their personal life is affected, not only their professional life is affected, but also the fact that they cannot protect their sources. So who would speak to them if their sources are in danger? That's a big problem. But, it's also for some media to change offices, because they don't know if the phone that is sitting on the table is listening to you at that moment and what is happening. So the impact is really, really big and problematic. The government's response, I mean, clearly we could not talk to governments, to the Ministry of Justice, we asked, but we could not talk, and the government response, we understand, has been first a sort of like denial, saying this is happening through some bad apples. Then they've been saying like, well, that's something for the courts. The courts will have to decide. So we are waiting for that to come out. I mean, what is important to know is that especially this predator is illegal in Greece. So the use of it is not regulated by any law at the moment, and this is quite problematic. So that's something to bear in mind, which places the actions of those who used predator in the sphere of illegality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And let's see now, Attila, what were the takeaways on the phenomenon of legal threats against Greek media and Slavs, of course.
So thank you for inviting me. You asked about methodology. I'm Hungarian, sitting in Berlin, so I live in Berlin. I'm not far away from Greece. I represent a global press freedom organization committed to protect journalists, and Greece has been on our radar for a couple of years now. It means that I come here regularly. I was here on an individual mission last year. I'm in touch with local journalists. I open Greek media every day, so I monitor what's happening here on a daily basis. And this mission was an important step in this monitoring, in this research, because it gave us and me an opportunity to meet the journalists I'm in touch on a regular basis. And honestly, it was, when it comes to legal threats, it was harrowing to listen to the stories of journalists who face legal threats individually, or sometimes, or most of the time, together with their media outlets, defamation or other infraction of different laws, including privacy laws or GDPR regulation. And sometimes these lawsuits go into the tens or sometimes the hundred thousands of euros of damages in terms of threats. So it was really terrible to listen to their stories, because knowing how journalists work, It means that these lawsuits tie up their resources, tie up their time, sometimes threaten them existentially, threaten their newsrooms existentially, even if these lawsuits sometimes don't end with damages, but that's actually not their goal. So that's why we call them strategic lawsuits against public participation, because powerful individuals, businessmen and politicians sue newspapers and journalists individually, sometimes even knowing that these lawsuits will not bear fruit for them, but the goal is in itself to tie up the resources of the newsrooms, to take away their time for further investigations and just silence them in the long term. So, of course, legal systems work in all European countries, and everyone has the right to go to court and sue newspapers. But these lawsuits we consider as an abuse of the legal system. It's weaponizing different laws, including defamation, privacy laws. Powerful individuals and businessmen go to court just for the sake of it and just to silence journalists and news outlets who publish sometimes basic public information or critical reporting on environmental issues, on businesses or public officials. So this is clearly an abuse of legal system. And one of our findings, I mean, it fits into the pattern of what Jasmine and Massimo said, that first of all, recognition, right? So what I was feeling personally, that there is a discrepancy between the dimension of the problems in terms of legal threats and the recognition by the authorities that this is happening, and this is threatening press freedom in Greece. So it would start with recognition and also data collection and knowing what kind of lawsuits are going on a national level, so that we know much better the depth of the problem.
Thank you, thank you. Jamie, what about the media ownership model? What would you highlight regarding the ownership model of media, but also and if is it connected with pluralism in media, the diversity of voices?
Yeah, that's one of the more complex things to analyze. Obviously, we have the kind of immediate threats, and we met with journalists, Thanasis Koukakis, who was surveilled with predator spyware. We met with, on SLAP's Reporters United, who are subjected to one of the most egregious lawsuits that at least I've ever seen, for making revelations about the nephew of the Prime Minister, Dimitriades, and his alleged role in the spyware operations of government. But we also had a meeting where we wanted to go a little bit deeper and look at pluralism and media ownership, which are really quite thorny issues. But I mean, overall, I think our assessment is that Greece suffers from really deep, ingrained and long-term systemic issues in the media landscape. And so many of these really stemmed from the prolonged economic and financial crisis, which really weakened what was already quite a small market and exacerbated this kind of entanglement of media with business, vested business and commercial interests. So across Europe, it's not rare for big legacy media broadcasters these days to be owned by wealthy individuals. But what sets Greece apart in this field is the concentration of bigger media under owners in one industry, which is ship owning. All of the largest television stations and much of the print legacy, fall under this kind of ownership model, which has obvious ramifications because many of these owners have cross-ownership interests in industries which are dependent on state finances. So there's a potential conflict of interest there. And it's clear that there are also demonstrable political links as well. So altogether, this kind of undermines the editorial independence of these bodies. And I think lowers public trust in them as well. So that was one of the big issues. It doesn't mean the censorship within these bodies has to be overt and clear, but what we heard from journalists is that self-censorship in the journalistic community in Greece can be rife. And that's made even worse by the kind of economic precariousness situation that journalists work in, with very low wages, weak labor protections, again stemming back much of it to the financial crisis, which leaves them in a very vulnerable position are you going to go to your editor and try and publish a major investigation into a ship owner or a football club, which is also owned by the same ship owner? These kind of issues were teased out in a lot of the conversations that we had from journalists.
And then sorry for interrupting you, but it's very important the way you explain where exactly is the dangers on all this, and it has to do with the conditions, and conditions include, among other, the very low funding and the very low investments, actually, for all these very well funded organizations from their owners and according to their business. So based on their business, all the owners, or the majority of the owners, let's say, they should at least guide it and manage their media in a totally different way. And consequently, the conditions for their journalists to do independently, but also in a safe way, not safer, safe way, their work.
Yeah, definitely.
Because just to explain, I don't want to take your time, but just to explain, there is an argument which says, okay, we do know that journalism is something expensive, so somebody should put the money. Yeah, okay, but how, when, and through which process? And under what kind of conditions for journalists and journalism overall?
Yeah, I think there's something we definitely saw a lack of investment from owners, but also just, the amount of money that's going into journalism in Greece, and that's not an issue specific to Greece, it's across Europe as well, is low, and that has detrimental effects on the quality of journalism here.
Exactly.
And just a quick note, on pluralism, there are there's so many media outlets in Greece. It's a densely populated market, but it doesn't mean that it's a pluralistic market. That's the key difference. So I think when the spyware revelations came out, it took weeks, if not months, for major media to publish any information about this, that a journalist had been surveilled. That's a major public interest story with major ramifications more widely, and it took a long, long time. On pushbacks, refugee issues, there's just almost no major reporting on these issues. So pluralistic coverage is quite weak as well. And then there's other issues in the background with the public broadcaster, the independence there, the news agency, regulatory bodies. So yeah, there's so many issues to deal with there.
And there is another one very sensitive issue, which has to do with the registration of media. Where, if yes, where do all these media are registered? And what's going on with other smaller, I can't call them newsrooms, but companies or any kind of, I don't know, business. I don't know how policymakers, for sure, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
where are all these sites, blogs? We don't even know how many are they, to whom they belong, what exactly, if they have journalists as employees. I mean, who are they?
This is a massive issue. Transparency of media ownership was something that we discussed as well in one of our meetings and raised with the task force as well. There are a number of these obscure, non-transparent online media in particular that, let's be honest, publish pretty defamatory attacks.
Are they governed to a specific list? What did you find, I mean?
So there are now initiatives underway, well, by the government actually, and this is one of the good things we would point out, to create new media registries, both for online and for print media, where if you're not registered in this registry, then you cannot apply for state advertising campaign funding, which can be a decent source of revenue. And that's an attempt to kind of slice off the ability of these obscure media to receive state money, which is something that we saw in the PETSAS list. There was media there which had been essentially created days before in order to gain access to some of this kind of public health messaging during the COVID. So that's something that there are now steps being taken to address, but the impact of this is yet to be seen, and it's very difficult to actually go into this system and trace, okay, who owns what, who are the real beneficial owners as well. But there is some positive steps there, yeah.
Let's start the second cycle of our discussion, which has to do with the main point, which is the recommendation. How can we restore, if we can restore this environment? Yasmin?
I think on safety, firstly, to solve a problem, you need to know how big it is. And whether we talk to Katamarini, to Reporters United, to Star TV, every media outlet we spoke to experiences attacks against journalists. but not all of them report them, and government authorities often fail to proactively collect this data. So our first recommendation is to create an adequate monitoring platform to see how many of these attacks are happening, where and when. Secondly, we call on the Minister of Civil Protection and Justice to dedicate extra resources and staff to investigations of all crimes against journalists, to prioritize this issue, develop a special protocol. And thirdly, for an independent authority to investigate why no convictions have been achieved in any of these cases. Attila and I are tomorrow presenting a report on the 2010 murder of Socrates Joyas, which confirms that this has been an issue for a long time, so it warrants an independent evaluation of why this consistently is failing.
Thank you. Attila?
So, in terms of SLAPs, Greece is not alone. This problem is a European problem, and there is a recognition already on behalf of the European Commission, the European Union, that this is a problem affecting many countries, abusive and frivolous lawsuits, which target journalists and also civil society activists. There is a draft, a proposal for a directive on a European level, and also a set of recommendations which address the problem and has a set of ideas, a set of recommendations for member states how to approach this problem. So our ask for the Greek authorities are actually very, very simple: to look at these recommendations and look at this European Union level directive and prepare already or tackle the issue on the Greek level and prepare a set of measures in a transparent way to address this problem in Greece. So it starts with recognition, first of all, and also when it comes to further legislative changes, especially defamation law, may be mindful of the possible negative impact any change in the defamation law, for example, or any other law could have on journalists' work. So recognition and tackle the problem, be inspired by European set of recommendations and rules.
Thank you. Massimo?
Yeah, I mean, first, I mean, clearly there is a need to regulate the issue of surveillance and spyware. So to bring it in line with the European standards, you know. So, I mean, when is spyware allowed? When it is allowed to surveil somebody? You know, only for very specific reasons like national security, which needs to be narrowly defined. Then this needs to be done through a law. There needs to be a principle of legality and a principle of proportionality. So basically, we need to make sure that when people are spied, this is only necessary to the extent that is foreseen by the measure, you know. And in particular, what we found, you know, there's a need in Greece to remove the sort of like 3-year ban that persons affected by surveillance cannot ask for information. So, and there is a need to create an oversight committee that will make sure that people have an independent body judging whether they're being, surveilled or not. So this is like the findings that we have. And in particular, we want to stress the need to support independent authorities that are in charge of providing security to the communications, trying not to undermine them, because this is also a risk that is ongoing. So this is like the main recommendations that we have identified during our mission.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'll keep it short as we're running out of time a little bit. But yeah, this is a really complex one. But transparency in the allocation of state advertising is vital. Transparency and full transparency in media ownership and beneficial ownership, vital as well. That's from the government side. But journalists also have some responsibility here. You know, that separation of church and state in terms of the newsroom and advertising, there needs to be another one added of newsroom and ownership to create safeguards within newsrooms to make sure there's editorial independence and that's strengthened. And then collective agreements, more work by unions to increase the economic situation in which journalists work in so that they feel more able to be courageous and carry out the investigations they want to. IPI is working now with a journalist from Greece, excellent journalist from Inside Story, about a report on media capture, looking at the 4 pillars of media capture: capture of private media, public media, capture of the system for funding through state advertising media, and also the regulation of media. So we hope when that's published later this year, that can start a bigger conversation about the systemic changes that need to happen. So yeah, create a more pluralistic and better media ecosystem.
Thank you. I would like one of you to share with us another examples, what's going on in the rest of the Europe, either as an example, as a nice example and case, or even a worst scenario, a worst case in Europe. According to your...
Everybody's looking at me, I'm Hungarian.
Yeah.
So I know how it looks when a country is on a democratic path and makes a U-turn. I left Hungary in 2011, and the last 10 years has been a spiraling deterioration. And honestly, when I came here last year to meet Greek journalists, it was very often mentioned that is Greece on the path towards Hungary, and I see worrying signs, honestly. And so Hungary is definitely a bad example in that sense. And if I have to mention good examples, like I think we all of us sit in different meetings with different authorities in different European countries on similar press freedom missions. I was just a couple of weeks ago in the Netherlands. We were a couple of months ago in Kosovo, and what the usual example I say about these meetings, that there is a difference between how authorities react to criticism and react to specific recommendations. Sometimes authorities listen and say, well, listen carefully and say, well, this is difficult for us here for this and that reasons, but you see a positive attitude in terms of we want to improve, we want to take European examples, and we want to work on it. Like Netherlands is definitely an example where journalist murder happened. There are a lot of negative tendencies, but what we experience from authorities is that there is a willingness to improve. And Kosovo is also another example where I felt that people listen to us and people listen to our recommendations. So I would like to see Greece maybe in the coming years or next year to come back and see authorities to really feel the depth of the problem, the dimension of the problem, and show, positive, active attitude in terms of change.
And following your answer, I would like, and this is my final question, Jamie, to ask you, what if all these authorities, although they seem to be, in some countries at least, more than willing to help, to support, to create all this safe space for journalists and journalists, but what happens if those in power disregard your recommendations, your requests, or all these best tools and practices that we discuss?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely one of the things. We see a big mismatch between the rhetoric of the Greek authorities and the actions of the Greek authorities on media freedom. So we were requested to meet with the Prime Minister, the Minister of Justice. We were able to meet with the Secretary General of the Ministry of the Civil Protection, and we met with the task force as well. So it's not like it was a complete ignored. But we've been making recommendations for years now. We've done the mission before. We've been here this year. We've been doing public advocacy in Greece with our members, and all of our organizations have for a long time. But so far, not so much has changed. But I think one of the key issues is that Greece is an EU member country. It cares about its reputation internationally. It cares about its image on democracy. So even if the warnings that we're making, the recommendations that we're making are not heeded nationally, of course, all of the advocacy and the reports we're publishing are going to be provided to the European Commission, to the European Parliament, to the Libe Committee, to the Council of Europe, and we're hoping that pressure can be enacted through those bodies. Because if pressure is coming from there, then we hope Greece will respond.
Thank you.
And just one positive note, we've been very depressing, but some excellent journalism is being done in Greece on a range of different topics. You have amazing investigative public interest media, but they're small, they don't have enough funding. So if they can have more influence, more support, more readership, I think that would really, really help. And so yeah, there are some positives.
There are, that's why we're here as well.
Of course, very much so.
There are, of course there are. there are, and we're honored having them, with us, being and trying, we from our perspective, they from their work, to be connected and keep trying. That's the reason why. Okay, the time is over, but I would like, to, if we could please have one or two maybe questions. Place the microphone there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for what you do. I would like to tell my own experience living in Greece as an Afghan refugee. Before saying my experience because of the suppression of my work and journalism, I would like to give you a history. I come from a journalistic and artistic background from Afghanistan and Kabul, and that's why we had to leave when I came in Greece as a refugee.
Yeah, please respect the rest of the audience.
When I came to Greece, I was in Moria, and because of the situation in Moria, I started documenting and showing the situation. And later on, I made a documentary that called Moria 35. Basically, this documentary portrays the police violence on migrants and refugees in Greece. And this documentary I made it in 2018, and that really turned to be something bad to me. And I was being attacked 2-3 times, and less was physically, and I was receiving calls. And when I came to Athens, I moved to Athens. For my education, I got a scholarship. I was fortunate. And then the same thing happened, and then this made me to stop from being active, and that was the main reason I escaped from Afghanistan here in Greece, and I have faced the same issues. Actually, it has been just a year that I started being involved, creating some contents, but still the fear is there. And one of the things that you mentioned is also access to resources to make sure that people you interview, they don't want to do this. They don't trust because they're afraid of their own position, especially refugees and migrants, that they're in an extremely vulnerable position. Mm-hmm. Just want to comment on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And place the microphone here, and then to you. Since you had already the microphone, we will close with you.
Okay. What works? Okay. I want to address a question to Attila Monk. 6 years of hunger, and hunger is also one of the worst European countries in terms of freedom of press. But what do you expect? Can you say some difference and similarities between Hungarian mass media and Greek mass media? Do you think that do you think that Hungarian media
about the mass? Your question is about mass media, right?
Do you think that Hungarian media are in the same level as the Greek media, or better, worse?
Okay. So it has to do about the situation and the conditions that mass media are right now regarding, Who?
In Hungary, I think, yeah.
Yes, for Attila Monk.
Yeah, Attila.
I can speak briefly, but honestly, Jamie can also speak about, or we can also speak about, because we did mission to Hungary as well. So of course it's difficult to compare. Hungary is a totally different market, but what maybe connects the two things, what Jamie just said, that diversity doesn't necessarily come with a number of media outlets. In Hungary too, there are a lot of TV stations, a lot of radio stations, a lot of newspapers, but what we can call mass media or mainstream media is mainly in the hands or under the influence of the government and the ruling party. So the market is very much controlled by the ruling party.
Thank you so much. We have just 1 minute, please.
Can I ask another question? Oh, no. But this time to Jamie Weissman.
Okay, the question for you, Jamie, and please the microphone to Mr. Eager, and then we'll close with you. We have closed, unfortunately, we're over time.
Okay, and someone wants to ask a question.
Thank you.
Give the microphone to someone else.
Yeah, please, very
Yeah, very quickly.
short
And
questions,
thank you
please.
for your time and your work. My question is this, building off Anna's question and Jamie's last comment. The issues in Greece are common to varying degrees throughout the UE, throughout the world, but would the efforts of solution be more powerful coming from a UE body than trying to do country by country by country? And I pose that question wondering if that's, because you can only spend so much time in so many places, is that a more powerful tool to use?
Like a union, let's say, my comment.
So I mean, the European Commission has proposed the draft Media Freedom Act, which is the first major systemic attempt to create a directive or a set of rules which would be implemented across all EU member states, which aims on issues of transparency, media ownership, public funding to media, would regulate spyware. It's really quite all-encompassing. That's in development. Every single one of our organizations is advocating for that to be as strong as possible. And that would affect not just Greece, but all countries, including Hungary. Now, implementation would be key. Some of the systems of media capture are so ingrained that we're concerned it wouldn't have full effect, but it would, if passed in its current form and not weakened, have some impact in unwinding some of these kind of situations and improving.
And the last question or comment?
Open? Yeah. Can I talk? All right. So I just wanted to ask, because we're always focused on the government and stuff like that, what do you think is the audience responsibility, right? So, for example, you mentioned, Jamie, there's like many outlets in Greece which are independent. They're doing a good job. They're doing investigative stuff, and they're still struggling. And I don't think the solution is always for some exterior force for funding, coming to save the day. But it should be the audience, supporting them. And what do you think? How do you think this can happen? But for example, I don't know, the Wall Street Journal, when Murdoch took it over, everyone was like, "Oh, is it going to change?" But then, the reporters stood out, and it's a very powerful paper, and it counts on its audience. That this, for me, this is even more of a problem. That the Greek media are so small in terms of circulation, in terms of clout, so they have to depend on their owners. So is there anything we can do and focus on making the public support real journalism and such outlets as you guys mentioned, which do such amazing work, and they're just not making it financially without external support? Thank you.
I would also like to answer to you, but please, Jamie, the question was referred to you. No, please.
I think the development of a culture within countries of paying for news, subscription-based models, is something that can help, generate much more revenue for these kinds of smaller, independent, investigative journalism. And there are some indications, I think, that people are moving in that direction. But right now, I think that's not something that we see in Greece. So, but that involves regaining public trust in media, I think. And I was speaking to a taxi driver the other day, and we were asking, what media do you read? And it was just social media, Telegram. You hadn't heard of the wiretapping scandal. So I think, over the many years, because of all of the issues we've discussed, there's been a reduction in public trust. I think that Reuters' digital news report ranked Greece as the least trusted media of any EU country. And I think from here
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Thank you.
So I think, readers are crucial. New models of a business model for this kind of journalism. But also there are good examples in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands, of public funds, funds for public interest journalism, which is state money administered independently on project basis for community media, local media, reporting on certain issues, and that could be part of the bigger picture as well.
And all this, it's our responsibility. It's not audience's responsibility. And we don't have the responsibility we have, it's not equal. So we've lost the trust of the audience. And then we can start, after fixing the landscape and after supporting even we, as members of the same community, our colleagues from all these independent initiatives, then we can ask, where is the audience? Because I strongly believe that it's very attractive narrative, this individual responsibility. If we want to remain a community, if we want to call us society, we should collectively, professors and professionals in this field, to fix whatever has been disastered, and then call audience, the audience, and address where does the audience stand. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.